Hey everyone, welcome to Implausible Nature, your home for all things Black Templar. On today's video, we are kind of going back to basics a little bit here. Going to talk about some of our BT specific units in another tactics video here. We figured it was time to do another video on Primaris Crusaders, and we're going to do one on Sword Bros too. Because it's been, according to YouTube, it's been a year since we've talked about them, in a tactics video. So the meta has changed a lot since then. Their points have changed. Other units that affect these guys have changed. So we thought it was time to kind of go back over them and talk about them and kind of see where they're at and what their place is in the meta and how to use them most effectively on the battlefield. Also, we have a new detachment, which I think they work really well in, even if that detachment itself is not necessarily, the top tier detachment. So let's get into it here. Well, first we're gonna, just like we did in our previous Reavers video, we're gonna talk about the data sheet here. So we have two stat lines in our Primaris Crusader squad. Of course, they have neophytes who have a different save. Other than that, it's your bog standard Space Marine stat line: 6-inch move, tough 4, 2 wounds, 3+ save on the power armor guys, 4+ save on the neophytes. They are OC2 because they are Battleline, so that's important to note. Also, just something to note as far as your models are concerned, neophytes are going to be on smaller bases. They're on 28 millimeter. Regular guys are on 32 millimeter, and the Sword Bro is on a 40 millimeter. Unfortunately, despite that, he doesn't have the Sword Bro stat line from the actual Sword Bro unit. He's sort of like a budget Sword Bro. He's the Temu version of Sword Bros. Because he only has 2 wounds, and he only gets a measly 3 attacks on his power weapon, which is his only melee option. You can't even give him a chainsword, which I would honestly take 5 more chainsword attacks, I think, over this power sword. He does, however, get the option to take a Pyre Pistol, which is nice, and I would absolutely take that because it's D6 hits. I mean, one more regular, heavy bolt pistol shot, not super great. I'd rather have a little bit of flamer capability, especially into, some of our more lightly armored foes, like the brand new, at least at the time of the recording of this video, Eldar Codex and the soon-to-be brand new Guard Codex. That will help you a lot. But you can equip the rest of the squad with either bolt rifles and bolt pistols, or chain swords and heavy bolt pistols. You also have 2 special weapon options you can take, where you can take either 2 power fists, any combination of up to 2 power fists, up to 2 pyroblasters. Now, these pyroblasters did not get the buff that the Infernus Marines got. They are still AP 0, and we'll get into that in just a second. First, to finish out their data sheet, they do have the grenades keyword, which is great. Most of our infantry does. Really good keyword there. They have scouts 6 inches, which is fantastic. It's one of the big reasons to me to take them, is being able to utilize that scouts movement so that you can, really put them in position to be successful. And then their ability is Righteous Zeal. You can reroll advance and charge rolls for this unit. So that's really handy, depending on how, what you're trying to do with them. So they can be taken as a 10-man with 4 neophytes, and then 5 Crusaders or initiates, and then the Sword Bro. Or a 20-man, where you basically double all those numbers except for the Sword Bro, who you can only take 1 of. So a couple options there. Obviously, we know they've gotten a points increase. They're 150 points for 10 and a staggering 320 for 20. So quite a big jump in points to take a 20-man. And partly that was due to, just how good they were at 280 points before the most recent data slate. Overall, their weapons are really good. Most important to note, their chainswords, which even the neophytes have the same chainsword profile, have 5 attacks. Most other chainsword wielding Astartes have 4 attacks. So an extra attack per guy. That's going to net you an extra 10 attacks per 10 man. That's pretty powerful. Obviously, though, you're going to want to take Power Fists because the Power Fists are really nice, getting 6 attacks, with the damage 2, AP 2, Strength 8, hitting on 3s with that Power Fist. So that's their data sheet. Anything you want to add, Bob, as far as their data sheet is concerned?
Nope, that's pretty self-explanatory. So it's the data sheet that we all know and love.
Yep, exactly. So how to kit these guys out? So they obviously have some ranged options, and they have melee options. Now, once upon a time, there was an argument to be made for running them with some of the ranged guns. Not really anymore. And the reason for that is Intercessors got a huge glow up in the most recent data slate. And with all their extra shots, and Infernus Marines too, they got an extra AP. So if you really want Pyroblasters, run Infernus. If you really want bolt rifles, run Intercessors because they're just straight up better in both cases. So
Yep.
we're not going to want to kit these guys for guns, ranged, longer ranged weapons at all. We want to kit them for melee. So you're going to take 2 Power Fists, and then everybody else with a Chainsword and heavy bolt pistol, and then of course like I said, the Sword Bro, the Sergeant, Timu Sergeant is going to have the Pyre Pistol. Now I do want to note here that something that has come up a lot on our Discord, and some people, and I've seen it on the Facebook group, and some people feel very strongly that it's like cheesy to do this or whatnot, but it is the way the rules are written. When you take a chainsword and a heavy bolt pistol, you're only exchanging your bolt rifle. So technically, we are dual wielding pistols because they all keep their bolt pistol, even the chainsword wielding guys. So they all keep their bolt pistols. So you technically have a bunch of guys with, 2 bolt pistols, with the heavy bolt pistol and the regular bolt pistol. The neophytes don't, but the regular guys do, I believe. So that's just something to note. That is the way the unit is written. Whether you want to shoot those extra bolt pistol shots is completely up to you. They're very, very going to be incidental. I would not count on them for anything. It's not like any kind of huge power creep on there. So yeah. Bob, any reason you can think of why we would want to take bolt rifles and pyroblasters on this squad?
Before the intercessor glow up, I would say maybe, but now there's literally no reason. If you want guns, you're taking intercessors. If you want melee, you're taking Primaris Crusader squads.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to gimp your squad in one way or the other. The only very fringe thing that I could say that you may possibly want to do bolt or bolt rifle is if you're planning on sitting on a home objective with it and you want it to interact with the rest of the board, or even sitting in the center of the board or no man's land with a big blob. Maybe, but even then, it's more efficient to take the chainswords that have the better AP overall. You get more attacks, and to just countercharge something and go back onto the objective.
Yep. And for a home objective sitter, I'd rather put intercessors there anyway. They have sticky, they can walk away from it,
Yep.
and they have twice as many shots. And note that the neophytes don't have the bolt rifle. They have the neophyte firearm, which is essentially a bolt gun. So it's really pitifully bad. It's not even really a bolt gun. I think it's only 18 inches, range. So it's horrendously bad compared to intercessor shooting, which got a significant glow up. So that's how we're gonna kit them. That's a bit about the data sheet there. Let's talk about the synergies. And boy, there are a lot of synergies that can be had with this unit in multiple different ways. What are some of your favorite synergies, Bob?
I think the most obvious is going to be using our special characters, our epic heroes. So either Grimaldus, who is the main one, who likes to be with the big 20-man blob squad. Now, you're not going to see this as often now because of the points cost of the unit, both between Grimaldus getting a hefty nerf and the squad being increased like 40 points. But it's a unit that is insanely durable and next to impossible to kill in one turn. So it has to, if you plop the thing right there in the center of the border or no man's land on one of your objectives, your opponent has to dedicate a lot of resources to taking that thing out. Meanwhile, you're sucking up that objective, blocking it off, screening it. Even if you get charged into it, you're still probably going to be taking that objective, and you can potentially, consolidate and pile into that combat, preventing them from even touching the objective, and you still have OC2 on it. So that's probably the easiest and most common one that people most talk about. But there's also Helbrecht, who synergizes very well with the chainswords, bringing it up to strength 5, as well as giving him the critical hits on 5 ups. So if you are accepting a challenge, getting your suffer not to get lethals or sustained hits 1, that is a huge synergy for your Marines in your Primaris Crusader squad. And that you don't even need to have a 20-man squad. So I think it's important to note that on most of these characters, you can take them on a 10-man and it'll be fine. But just remember, as we talked about numerous times, is if you put a character on them that does not have scouts, and I'm fairly certain there is nothing in the codex that can attach to a Primaris Crusader squad that has scouts, you're going to lose it on the unit, so you're going to have to walk normal.
Which, honestly, I mean, if you're taking Grimaldus or Helbrecht on a big blob, 20-man blob, I'm fine losing that for the buffs that those two characters provide for this unit. Grimaldus has a slew of buffs. He gives him a 5-up Feel No Pain if you want, which you're going to, run a lot of the time with them. If you need some more damage output, he can give an extra AP. He can also advance and charge. So, and with that, they re-roll that advance and that charge, which makes them pretty speedy. Just don't flub your rolls like a certain Black Templar player I know.
Yes. So another one that's really kind of big is lieutenants or castellans. Obviously, thematically, castellans are the one that we're going to be going with. They're not quite as good as a lieutenant is, due primarily to the weapon choices that you get, but it will give them the lethal. So if you're accepting a challenge, you can give them lethal hits, which is going to make their damage go up significantly because they are honestly just powerful. You can also combine that with Helbrecht as well to get some additional damage out through that Crusader squad. Now, Helbrecht's probably not going to be escorting a Crusader squad in most lists. If you're bringing him, he's going to be with a Primaris Sword Brethren squad. But it's still something to consider, and you can throw a Castellan or a Lieutenant onto that squad and up their damage significantly. And I think that's a good combo for quite a few different lists that you can potentially do if you want to just up their damage just a little bit with a minimal investment.
Yeah, I agree. Helbrecht with his extra, critting on 5s in Righteous Crusaders, being able to, trigger Suffer Not or, AAC, Accepting Challenge. Both of those characters. The other thing, too, about especially if you have a big squad with one of those characters leading it is now you can target them with Fervent Acclamation and get a second vow on top of the one that you already have, which is really nice. That allows you to get both sustained and lethal hits potentially, if you want to. And you think about a 20-man squad. If for some reason it survives to charge its target unscathed, that's 75 chainsword attacks. That's an absurd amount of attacks. Even if you lose like 3 guys, you're still at 60 chainsword attacks. I mean, like that's like orc level of dice. so
Plus the Power Fists,
plus
which
the
are
power
no
fists,
slouch.
yeah, and your Timu sword bro. Both of them provide a ton of benefit. If you want to kind of go budget with a 20-man blob, like Bob said, a Castellan or a lieutenant is good. I would even say Castellans and lieutenants are cheap enough that if you're running 3 or 4 squads, you could take one of them and sacrifice scouts and put it on the 10-man. And it would work okay on a 10-man too. Now, something to note with all their chainsword attacks and even the power fists, they really need some kind of melee buff. And so you want to be buffing them with something that is like lethal or sustained, just depending on who you're targeting, because that really what takes them from like a mediocre solid melee unit to something that can kill stuff like punch way above their points. Especially lethal is really good for them into harder targets. When you're fighting something like elves or where they're guard, where there's just a lot of infantry to tackle, the sustained hits really really important. So running them with characters definitely helps to buff them. Uh, Especially in Righteous Crusaders, where you want to be able to target a larger blob with the Fervent Acclamation strat. Um,
Yeah.
so,
They're also a great recipient of in Righteous Crusaders, Wrath Crusaders,
yep,
or Crusaders Wrath.
Crusaders Wrath, really
They get
good.
that extra AP.
Get that extra AP, really good. Option for them if you're in what's it called, Suffer Not. They also get a +1 strength, which is very nice. So that gets them to a nice break point. Strength 5 is still a good break point, even though Strength 6 is sort of challenging it for the best break point, just because there's a lot more tough 5 and tough 6 stuff out there now. So both of those good break points, getting to Strength 5, really really good. There's a lot of toughness 5 out there. So
And note, remember, with the new FAQ, and if you are in accept any challenge and you fervent acclamation them to go into Suffer Not, then you still get the benefits of the
yes,
extra strength with
yes,
Crusader's Wrath.
exactly, exactly. That's really important to note. Same thing if you decided to slap, like I said, you know, budget 20-man blob, Castellan with the Sigismund Seal, gives you those crit hits on 5s, and it works with Fervent Acclamation. So, giving you the ability to be in a different vow for your army and then slap accept any challenge onto them, for those crit hits. Um, yeah, and in Wrathful Procession, they have quite a bit of synergy too. The
Mm-hmm.
extra movement, especially +1 advance and +2 to movement, makes them crazy fast because you're gonna want to scout them, then move 8, then advance them. Turn 1, you can really have them basically halfway across the board because they're re-rolling, their low advance rolls and getting +1 on top of it. So really makes them very very speedy. Um, they are going to suffer damage output wise. That's something I've noticed in my games with Wrathful Procession is you rely a lot on the Power Fist to kind of do some damage into tougher things because +1 strength is great, but which you can get in Wrathful Procession as well. but not having access to lethal hits or sustained hits really means you want to throw them into the Oath unit or something along those lines, where you can try to maximize your damage output. So they, uh, I think that detachment more than Righteous Crusaders, it makes sense to throw the odd Castellan or Lieutenant into a 10-man. Even though you lose the speed of scouts, you get a little bit more damage output out of them. What are your thoughts on that, Bob?
Yep, I agree. They're very essential, in my opinion, to how Wrath of Recession works. Getting them to No Man's Land right away on first turn, if you so choose, depending on your matchup, obviously. But they allow us to compete with the really speedy units that are out there in Wrathful Procession, whether it be Eldar, Drakari, or some of those other ones that are the ability to move around the board really fast. And this unit can basically react to anything that your opponent's doing, provided it's still alive. But you still have to make sure that you are, even though you're probably using 10 mans in Wrath of Procession, maybe a 20 man, but you got to be careful with them and get them into the ruins and make sure that they're not getting shot. But they have a lot of synergy in this detachment.
Yeah.
Another detachment synergy I would say is less well known, but still something that we can do for the few out there running Vanguard is you can put Castellan and potentially even like Helbrecht on a 20-man unit and give your Castellan the blade. It's driven deep to give them infiltrate, and you can move this big old blob right there in the center or even close to your opponent's deployment zone and use it as a massive Carnifex, a distraction Carnifex that your opponent has to deal with that can do a crazy amount of damage with Helbrecht and the Castellan. So that's another synergy that there is out there.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Also anytime you can get advance and charge. So Gladius, has that option for them. Gladius also still has a good strat in Honor of the Chapter, I think it's called, where you get Lance, which is very nice for them. So, so yeah, there's a number of different, technically speaking, Stormlance, but I still don't think Stormlance is really worth running because 90% of it is based around bikes. And even though bikes got a little glow up, I still don't think that that detachment really can compete with our detachments even. Or Gladius or even Vanguard. So, so yeah. So we've kind of talked about a bunch of the synergies. Any that you can think of, Bob, that we didn't mention?
No, I think those are kind of the main ones that you typically see or hear about. Um, Honestly, I think a naked 10 man is perfectly fine in a unit. Just for objective holding, it's still it's cheap enough at 150 points that you're not going to be hamstrung if you take a unit or two, but it's fast enough and can get to the no man's land that it's not going to really, or it's going to impact your opponent's game plan.
Yeah. Honestly, I probably run two in just about every single one of my lists, more in Wrathful Procession. Just because to me, they're that good. I think they're 100% worth taking in every list. They just have a lot of utility. And even, just by themselves with no character, depending on your vow in Righteous Crusaders, they can hit pretty hard and punch above their weight. And, it's your opponent's going to, realize this is not a chaff squad that I can take out with something like my own chaff killing squad, because they're just not going to have the damage output to do it, and they're going to get hit back really hard. So, really great overall unit. So let's talk a little bit about how are we going to use these guys in battle. And on the tabletop, what is your main plan of attack? Depending on which detachment you're running with these guys, Bob.
So I typically play them with when I have them on my list. It's usually 2 units of 10 naked, and the standard melee setups. And I'm fairly aggressive with them. I do utilize the scout to get them into position. I try to get them into ruins if I can, uh, especially if I'm going first. You really don't want to leave anything on the open if you can avoid it. Obviously, that's probably going to set yourself up for failure if you are in the open, leaving a unit out there in no man's land to get shot. So you want to get that in ruins. The scouts will help you get there, as well as making sure that you can get that initial push that first turn and get onto an objective second turn. If you're in wrathful possession, you're going to be on the objective first turn. That's just what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's not worth doing. Being too aggressive can also hurt you. So you just got to have to play dependent on your opponent. So what they do is they're claiming the objective so that the second turn you can, or at least get on the objective second turn. There is some scoreable secondaries that you can do on the first turn, depending on how quickly you get out there. So that's going to really kind of depend on what you need to do there. But having that 12-inch movement right away out of your deployment zone potentially is really huge to be able to give you an ability to really dictate the terms of the engagement. And if you're doing tactical objectives, that can really give you some options that are putting pressure on the no man's land right away, that your opponent has to find a way to kill 10 Marines right away. Some armies are going to be better at that than others. Obviously, we have some that have just been released, like the Elder. They're have always been Marine killers, so you have to be especially careful when you're facing them. But there's ways to beat them. We just have to make sure that we are playing aggressively careful.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to be pretty aggressive with my deployment of them. Oftentimes, obviously, you have to look at your deployment zone and you have to see what the sight lines are and figure out, okay, if I deploy them on the line, can I get to cover the next piece of cover with my scout move? And that's how I typically deploy mine is I'm looking for, all right, where can I move? Where can I deploy them really aggressively on the line and still with my scout move get to the next piece of cover so that they can't be shot turn one if I don't get the first turn. Alternatively, you can also, do the opposite, right? Deploy them really aggressively. You'll know before you do your scout move whether you are getting the first turn or not. If you don't, if you deploy them to where you can back them up behind cover and stay in your deployment zone, that also can work. So yeah, I tend to be pretty aggressive with my deployment of them, just for that very reason. And then, you know, first turn is set up, right? I want to get them in position to do something on second turn, either go take an objective, or go kill a light infantry unit, one of their units, maybe an infiltrator type unit or something that's standing on one of the middle objectives. So that's kind of my first and second turn setup for these guys to be able to make sure that I can start pushing into the center and put pressure on my opponent.
Yeah, ultimately you have to remember these are 20 wounds that your opponent has to chip off
Yeah.
to kill the unit,
Yeah.
and that makes them an exceptional screen unit. So if you are trying to screen off objectives or screen off a deployment zone, whether you have some heavier weaponry that's back there, or maybe you need something to just screen off your deployment zone because they have a ton of deep strikers or whatever it is that you're trying to prevent, whether it be the Grey Knights or the Picky Uppies, they have a large footprint. They can screen well. They have that scout that will allow you to adjust your deployment if you need to without having to use stratagems. It's just all around they are a great adjustment tool in your toolkit with 150 points. They're not MSU, but they don't hurt you so much that you can't put them in a typically MSU list and still not get a lot of other units in your army.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're cheap enough to fit in a MSU style list, at least two of them. Um, you know, because they are all those things that you said, you know. So, something else to consider too is you want to make sure you're paying attention how you allocate wounds to them. And I do have a video on that, a Templar ship video. So go check that out on how to allocate wounds in 10th edition to these guys, because you can really improve the longevity of the unit by selectively picking whether you're going to put it on an initiate or a neophyte, and whether like if you're using things like cover, armor of contempt, things like that. So it's a good video. Go check it out. There's good information in there on how to make sure that you're maximizing your save potential with these guys. So yeah. Now, as far as sending these out to go and kill something, what are your primary targets, Bob, when you want to use these more aggressively as a melee unit?
So if I'm trying to kill something, I typically will kill something that is not a dedicated melee unit, unless I'm trying to screen something. So if you have something that's dangerous that's coming right at me that doesn't have fights first, that's key. That I know will just roll over me if I don't have an attack. I might charge into them and do as much damage as I possibly can first, and then let them hit back, even if it means losing the squad, because then I diminish what they have. In other times, I might just go in, attack the standard, hey, I'm just holding this objective that everyone has in their unit. So whether it be just their basic Battleline unit, because let's be honest, our Battleline unit within the Primaris Crusader squad can take on any other Battleline unit.
Yeah,
so
much.
If they're getting stuck on there, if it's a rack unit or an Elder equivalent unit, or I would even say Custodes in some cases, will be something that you can take on if you give them a little bit of a buff, a booster of sorts, and they can do some damage to those units, at least to diminish them enough to be able to be addressed with other pieces of your board. Now, again, you're not going to go into like Terminator blocks or things of that nature that is going to just rip you to shreds, unless you're trying to screen and diminish them enough because you want to turn the math into your favor. If you're shooting them with a bunch of your army, or maybe you have another unit that's a little bit down and you want to take care of them and follow up with another counter charge in a later turn, that's what you kind of want to use them for. But again, they're 150 points, so you don't want to waste them if you can help it, but they're cheap enough that you can utilize them for some of those tactical plays if you need to.
Yeah, and if the unit in question is a 20-man with like Grimaldus, like we said, is probably the most popular example of a 20-man unit.
Yep.
That is a unit that you can potentially send into a dedicated melee unit, because you can hit them with buffs like Crusader's Wrath for extra AP, or Grimaldus's buff, or lethal or sustained, or both, and you're just going to have so many attacks that you can kill your opponent through sheer weight of dice. Especially with something like lethals going into a tough target. You're going to oath that target most likely, and that is the 20-man with a character is a unit that you can really send into an enemy unit that is a dedicated melee unit, because it has the bodies to survive the crackbacks, and it also has the weight of attacks to bring down your opponent. If you don't kill it, you're going to severely, deplete it
Yep.
and cripple it, so that the attacks coming back at you are going to be much less. So,
Yep.
um, kind of the two ways to look at that, depending on whether it's a 20 man or 10 man or whatnot. So, um, so yeah. Any final thoughts, Bob?
So I will mention at the very last of this is uh, since the I would say probably summer when they took the points nerf. Gone are the days of taking 100 of these guys on the board and overwhelming your opponents.
Yeah,
So don't try that anymore. They
yeah,
are too expensive,
probably not for that.
and
Yeah.
there is too many armies out there that can kill them quick enough that are fast as well. So that's just something that you don't want to do anymore. So
Yeah. Something too that we didn't mention yet is Pariah Nexus does have a number of mission rules that benefit Battleline, and because these guys are Battleline, they will benefit from those buffs or rules, abilities, or whatnots. Um, so so yeah, things like I forget the name of it. There's one where you basically take an objective and score a point on it. The plant raise banners. That's what it's called. Raise
yep,
banners is a good example. That's free points from these guys just for standing on an objective that they want to do anyway. So something else to keep in mind. They're not. That's not. Those rules are not like massive swings, but it's something that you can look at and go, well, I don't have to worry about this mission rule because I've got plenty of battle line in my list, especially with intercessors now being as good as they are. So, so yeah. So yeah, thanks for joining us on this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope this was insightful, especially we're still getting a lot of questions from new players asking about how do I kit these guys? How do I use these guys? Are they still good? Are they too expensive? I mean, they're a little pricey, but I think 150 is okay for what we get from the 10 man. I think 320 is just a little bit too expensive
mm-hmm.
for the 20 man. I'd like to see that come down. I think 300 would be fair. Even 310 would be okay. I think getting a little bit of a points break on the 20 man would be a little bit better. But we'll see what happens whenever the next MFM comes out. Let us know down in the comments. What did you guys think? Are there any synergies that we missed, or any ways that you're using these guys that we haven't talked about? What successes are you having with your Crusader squads? Let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff that helps us, the YouTube algorithm, to make sure we can get this video out to more Black Templar players who may not be watching the channel. If you want to support us, we have a number of great ways that you can do that. You can support us on Patreon. We've got a lot of great benefits there. We also have YouTube memberships. You can support us there. Lots of great benefits and easy way to support us. We really appreciate all of our YouTube members and our patrons. Thank you guys so much for that. Check us out on Discord. Really great community of folks talking Black Templars every day. So come check us out there for lots more advice and chat about Black Templars. And until next time, keep on crusading.